I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
Spent that whole summer with me in my room watching movies every day.
I love the movies.
I love the movies.
I love the movies.
Welcome
The house.
Of 1,000 movies.
Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Hamilton Book. I've been buying from Hamilton Book for many, many years, and they are a great place to find amazing deals on physical media, whether it be Blu-ray, DVD, 4K movies, CDs, or books. They've got it all. Now, I recently placed an order with Hamilton Book, so let me tell you a few things that I grabbed and some examples of what you can find on their site. I got the amazing disaster film Earthquake on Blu-ray. I also got a 3D import of the film Gravity on 3D Blu-ray. Very hard to find, but Hamilton Book had it. I got an Olive Films Blu-ray release of Hitler, The Last 10 Days with Alec Guinness as Hitler. A great movie, and you can't find the Olive Films releases anymore, but Hamilton had them. And I also got Assassination Nation and You Are Not My Mother on Blu-ray. Those were all at an incredible price. We're talking like under $10 each, and they also have new releases, boutique Blu-ray stuff at really good prices. The best part about Hamilton Book is it's flat rate shipping, whether you buy 100 movies or 5 movies, 10 books, 20 books, 2 books, it's the same price for shipping no matter what. So if you want to give them a try, head over to hamiltonbook.com/house and check out their selection today. I can't recommend them enough. I've been a buyer for many, many, many years. I appreciate their support of the podcast, so go support them and their small business. hamiltonbook.com/house. Go check them out and let me know what you think. Hey everybody, it's Jeff. Welcome back to another episode of House of 1,000 Movies. Today's a special episode. We've got director Anthony DiBlasi on from Dread, Last Shift, Malum. A lot of movies that I just watched Malum again last night, but I watched Last Shift 10 years ago when it first came out. I knew of Dread. I got to revisit that one recently. Pretty intense movies that you've been making as a director, but I love them. I love this kind of stuff. So I'm very excited to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. And, you want to give a little 30-minute introduction to who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for having me on today. Yep. As you said, Malum's my latest film. I'm a mass hole adjacent to where you are, from Massachusetts originally.
Yep.
And then, was lucky enough when I went down to LA, I was at Emerson College at the time, got an internship with Clive Barker, and that kind of just catapulted me in terms of like getting in the business and getting into horror specifically, and being able to have, Dread, Clive Barker's short story, be my first feature. So that's how I got my feet wet, my feet bloody, as they say.
Yeah, I want to ask on that. Like, did you have a horror background going into this? Like, you were a big horror fan and you knew, like, were you targeting somebody like Clive Barker to go and work with and kind of work underneath?
It was always, I was always a big horror fan. Definitely grew up on horror, and special makeup effects were really kind of my gateway into stuff. I loved makeup effects. I loved like doing makeup effects at Halloween, and I did a bunch of special makeup effects on like some college and high school projects, things like that. So when I got out to LA, I had to get an internship, or they send you home. It's part of the program. And that was my last semester. So I was like, I knew I was going to live in LA. I already moved there. So I ended up getting an internship at Marvel Studios. And they had just finished the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. So it was right before they took off.
Okay.
And there really wasn't a lot to do. I was mainly making photocopies for like actor packets of like, let me introduce you to Doctor Strange. And here's like all just stuff about Doctor Strange. And I was only taking one class, which happened to be a horror class, like a horror on screen class, which is great that they offered a class like that. And I thought about, when I first got to LA, I was like, oh man, like everybody wants to produce and direct. And it's like, well, maybe I should be seeking out like a shop, like Optic Nerve or Stan Winston. Like maybe I can do something tangible because it's like an actual skill set. I reached out a bunch of those places, and I was waiting. Nobody was really looking for anyone. I was still doing Marvel, but so I reached out to my advisor. I was like, "Is there anyone? Is there any openings in horror? Do you know any contacts in horror? I'd like to do another internship. I don't want to waste my time down here while I have it." And she was like, "Well, sure. There's Wes's company and John Carpenter's company and Clive." And I had just got. I don't know if you remember the Nightmare on Elm Street box set that came out. It was all the DVDs together. It was a massive box set, and it had tons of special features.
Mm-hmm.
And on the special features, Clive was on there quite a bit, just talking about Freddy, but about horror. It was a whole. If you haven't seen it, it's been years since I watched it, but it was a very thorough kind of piece of BTS about horror in general and how Freddy Krueger was tied into this. And I just loved how Clive talked about horror and his beliefs about making horror. And I hadn't read a lot of his novels. I was a huge fan of his directing, so, Hellraiser and producing Candyman and Nightbreed and Lord of Illusions. He had a very specific style with the stuff that he directed. And when they said Clive, I was like, I would love to look into Clive. And when I reached out to them, his producing partner, executive, Joe Daly, was also from Massachusetts. So that was kind of like hey, I'm one of you. And so I kind of hounded them until they asked me to come up to the house, and I met Clive in that first interview, and I started as an intern there and just kind of got thrown into the fire very quickly.
So what year is this roughly? This is post Lord of Illusions. This is
this is
2002.
2002. 2002 is when I moved to LA. So that's when I met them.
Okay. And so then you worked with him for basically, because when Dread came out 2010, right? So you're with them for a while, right? Pretty much that whole decade.
That whole decade was, I was hired as an assistant, and then it was great to be on that side of things because it was a small company. It was Seraphim Films at the time, and I became an executive, and so we were developing I just consumed all of Clive's work, read all his books, all his short stories, and we were trying to get them off the ground in the studio system. And it was an interesting time because Clive had written these series of children's books called Aberrat, and he had just written the first book, and it hadn't come out yet, but he sold the film rights to Disney. So we had all this heat on this project that was a children's fantasy film, but it allowed us to set up all these horror properties around town at various studios because he had all this heat under his name again. But what would happen is they'd buy into the pitch, and then we'd start developing it to be like, wait, this isn't Stephen King. Right. This is twisted and bizarre and sexual and dark and taboo, and it always became an uphill battle for us to develop his stuff at the studio system because it was strange for them, and it was sometimes they were like, well, can we make this PG-13? But we did eventually get Midnight Meat Train made with Lakeshore and Lionsgate, and we got Book of Blood made, which we shot in Scotland, and that team that we did Book of Blood with is who we did Dread with.
Okay.
But all those years, it was a lot of what you would call development hell for a lot of years, where we just had a lot of Barker projects set up around town, but got only a few of them actually finished and completed. But it was great. It was a huge learning process.
Yeah, I think you said this in an interview, but they wanted it to be PG-13. I think you had said, hey, it's hard enough to get these to be rated R in the studio system with some of the stuff that he writes. And I get that. So I'm just surprised. I guess that's interesting, even with his success, that he's, he had Hellraiser, he had Candyman, he'd written all these stories. I mean, he's as much, I think, in what I've read from him, he considers himself writer first, filmmaker second. He'd written so many great stories, like you said, to a Stephen King level, and there just wasn't the appetite for it, I guess, at that time, which is interesting because it's at the same time that we have Hostel and Saw and all of these like really kind of gory, dark horror films coming
Yeah.
out.
Well, and yeah, it must have just been the era we were working in. And also, Dredd was at, first of all his work was supernatural, right?
Yeah.
So, besides, Dredd was at the time, and I still believe, Dredd was literally the only piece of work that he had written that was not supernatural out of all his collections and out of all his novels. So, with the studios, it was not only the strangeness or the sexuality of it or the, like Hellraiser pushes boundaries,
Oh yeah.
but it was the fantasy too, and some of it was so complex and interwoven. And Dread, I don't know why we had set it up at Fox. It was at Fox for a few years, and again we were in that kind of development health cycle, bringing in new directors, new writers, and I don't know. I think they were like, hey, it's a college thriller. Let's make it PG-13. We'll get more butts in the seats, and it was always like when they wanted to cut out the meat scene, and I'm like, but that's the whole book. That's the then there is no delight the equal of dread. I
Right.
thought that was such a well crafted, um, let's say, simile to dread, because the longer you wait, the worse it gets, right? And that was the whole thing with the meat. It's like, well, you could just sit down and eat that, but you're not going to, and it's going to rot and it's going to decay, and eventually you're going to have to eat it. And that's kind of
Right.
where our dread comes from, right? It's like not facing. It's that buildup of not facing our fear.
Right. No, it's interesting. And then, so I mean, how do you end up on that project? I guess you're in development hell. You said there were a few directors before it got to you. I mean, did it just come to a point where it was like, man, we can't get this thing done. I trust you. Like, you run with this, or did you raise your hand and go, hey, I think I can do this?
I
How did
had
that all come together?
I had adapted some of his stuff already. Very
Hmm.
like I, probably when I was there for about a year, I started, because they knew I wanted to write and direct. Like that was
Hmm.
my end game. And what I did is I adapted Thief of Always, which is another project that had tried to get done at Universal, and it had a lot of money against it. But I loved that book, and I said, well, why don't I just? I took the initiative. I'm just going to turn the book into a screenplay, because everyone has tried to turn it into something else. So I just adapted the book, a very faithful adaptation of Thief of Always, and showed it to Clive. He was like, "Oh, great." He's like, if you want to adapt anything else, go ahead." So
Cool.
I adapted Pig Blood Blues as a spec, because I loved that story in the Books of Blood, and that got me representation. And then I ended up doing like getting jobs. At, I did a draft of Damnation Game, which was at Phoenix Pictures at the time, and I think it was either at Warner Brothers or Sony, or it crossed hands. But so this was all pre-Dread, and while we were developing it, Dread at Fox, and they knew I was like, we had Midnight Meat Train being in production, and we had Book of Blood on the horizon. I said, listen, I'd love to direct the next movie, and I can't remember how we decided on. We had just gotten Dread back, but I don't remember why we decided to go with Dread instead of Pig Blood Blues. I don't remember where what what that decision was between the other producers and myself. But I did a new adaptation of Dread. We got it back from the studios. I did a new adaptation of Dread, which was more faithful to the book, with additions,
Hmm.
and rated R, and then that's what we ended up shooting.
So I mean, you've obviously done a ton of writing as much as you've done directing film. I mean, do you put yourself in the same boat that kind of Clive does, where you're like, I'm kind of a writer first, and if I get a chance to make films, or are you filmmaker first and you just happen to be a great writer? Because I find that very interesting when people are writing and directing. Like even a Tarantino will talk about, like, he loves to write, and it's not so much like making the films. He wants to write a book. So where do you kind of
Yeah.
fall in there?
I definitely write more than I direct.
Yeah.
Like through all those years, you're writing a bunch of stuff that never sees the light of day. And now, like, Natalie, my wife, and I are writing together. And it's like that output with writing is a lot more, so I don't know if I favor one over the. I also like to edit too, because lately in a lot of my stuff I edit myself. So I have done quite a few films that I didn't write, but I'll have to say, like, I feel like always my best films are the ones that I adapted myself.
Makes sense.
Yeah, right. And that it's right. I'm writing it for myself for the screen and also for the post-production process. So I don't know. I don't know if I could choose. I get to write as often as I want because I don't need cash flow to write. You know,
True. Right.
Yeah, I can sit at my computer and write.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. You don't need a budget for
Yeah.
Microsoft, Yep. That makes sense. But yeah, so you have Dread 2010, and then we get into 2014, you get Last Shift. And this is kind of like, for me, this is how I became to know who you were in your work. Like, this was the moment, would you say, for your career? This is the big moment that kind of set things off? Or
Yeah.
how do you view that film? Because I think it's very small budget, but I mean, it's excellent. It got such great reviews. It won all kinds of stuff of festival circuits. It was a killer horror movie.
Thank you.
Then I kind of then I want to ask about what how 10 years later we're doing it again. We'll get into that, but I'm just curious. That's such and you wrote that and you directed it, and like, where does that come from? Is that, this is an original? Is it something you'd been kind of throwing around for a while? How does something like that come to you one day? Because I'm very curious how that always happens.
Well, I had made 2 movies in Florida that I directed with these 2 producers, one named Scott Poyley, and they had written the scripts for them, and and they were, not massive budget movies, but they were sizable independent films where the recoupment's always tough when you're making an independent film at a higher budget, and and I share in part of that profit. And you're kind of like, okay, we sell the movie, and then the distributor takes all the money, and like, it's a tough process to stay on top of the distributor and be like, okay, are we making money? Is everyone being honest? And let's be honest, it's Hollywood, so how many people are being honest? But so I had approached Scott, and I said, why don't, and I, he was already a writer. I said, why don't we do something together and do it at a really small budget so that we can participate in the profit more. So that's where it stemmed from, right? And I said, I have made a string of what I would call not horror movies, right? Like Dread is a horror movie, but not really. It's more of a psychological thriller. Casadega was like a dramatic thriller, with a supernatural dramatic thriller, and Missionary was this kind of Fatal Attraction movie. And I don't know if I had done other things in between, but I wanted to make just a straight up horror film. Like, I just wanted to scare people. Just wanted to make sure that it was a movie written to scare people, that it felt like a carnival fun house, those haunted houses at the carnivals that have, should have gone out of business a long time ago. That, like at the Brockton Fair, right? I'd go to the Brockton Fair and have to worry about getting knifed, and that's the kind of movie I wanted to make. And I had worked with this sound team in Florida on these other movies, and I thought they were a really talented sound team. I liked their approach to sound, and I said, I'd love to make a movie that's so centered around sound design that it's in its inception. So that's where I originally said, what if we did something like in a dispatch office, because that would really integrate sound. You have this like lone dispatcher at this secluded office, and something else is going on, and that snowballed into what became Last Shift. And it was exactly the budget that I totally just spitballed out. But he's like, yeah, I can raise that much and we can shoot it for, I said, why, we can shoot it in 10 days. Cause if you're shooting a feature in 10 days, you're tripling your budget, because that's the trade-off. If you can shoot a movie in 10 days, or, and you're putting so much more dollars to each day. So if you can sustain a 10-day shoot with a quality, with all the money, your daily expenses, then it's going to feel like a movie that was shot at a much higher budget. And kind of by that point, I knew kind of what kind of writer I was, because when I did Dread, I ended up cutting 45 minutes out of that movie. The editor cut so much out of that movie because my page count to timing ratio was way off. That was probably a 118 page script, and it ended up being like a 2 hour and 40-minute movie, the first cut. And you realize soon, you're like, oh, that's just wasted money, right? That's just days of wasted money. So Last Shift was only 69 pages. And when we showed it to other producers, they're like, where's the third act? I'm like, it's there. It's just, so that 69 pages ended up being, 90 minutes on the dot.
Mm-hmm.
So it was those tricks of how we got to, and working with the sound team, we had designed all the sound in pre-production, and we had found, while we were writing the script, we found a decommissioned police station in Sanford, Florida. We wrote around that station. We had the sound team come out during pre-production and pre-record every creepy sound they could find in that place. And we also did a session with actors where they came in and did screams and whispers, and we did like a radio show session. I did all that before production, so had all that stuff going into the shoot, and then I had it in the edit process.
That's so interesting, because the sound design of that movie is what makes it so terrifying. Really, I mean, there's obviously there's some pretty terrifying imagery too, but that you started with the sound and basically worked from there is
from there.
That's super unique, and that makes total sense now watching it and knowing that, like, you can see how that worked, because that is. You gotta watch that one with like surround sound and let the stuff come at you from the back and from the sides, and it's really good.
It's either you're doing that in full surround, because we mixed it for a theater experience in full surround, but it also, if you watch it with a good set of headphones, you're gonna get a different kind of intimate, freaky experience.
I should try that. That's a good, like, I'll maybe sit here after this and put it on with just the headphones, dark room,
turn the lights out.
Yeah, pretend you're at the desk, and that would be pretty creepy too. But that is super interesting, because I don't know of many films that start with sound. That's a really cool, unique way of going about it. But it worked so well.
Thanks. Yeah, and for horror especially, I mean, so much is
sound
sound design.
Yeah, I know. I tell people, like, I think when people, and I talk about home theater stuff, and people always ask me, how many speakers do I need and all this, and like, I want to watch Top Gun, and so I gotta have, and I'm like, yeah, like, that works for surround sound, but like, if you haven't watched some of your favorite horror movies in a dark room with surround sound and really had that full effect, like, these things are designed to have auditory scares. And if you're just getting it from straight in front of you off of a TV speaker or something, it's totally not that different full experience. And I think it's like, it's more nuanced than, I got F-15s flying around my room through the surround sound. It's more nuanced play on the sound. But I've always told people, I think horror movies are some of the most effective when it comes to like using surround sound and using like the sound stage to actually develop an image in your head, because you're
messing, right? You're as filmmakers, we know we're messing with the audience, right? So, and there'll be times when you're watching a horror film in surround, and you'll be like, is that a real sound or is that in the movie?
Right.
You know, like, is that
Yes.
something outside or is that something at my front
Ugh.
door or is that,
Every time I watch them with my wife, I have the pause, and she's like, "Can you check? I think someone's
yeah,
at the door." And I'm
yes,
like, "No, I swear we're the only ones here. Like, I promise. One of these
yeah,
times is gonna be something going on, and I'm gonna
yeah,
ignore
exactly,
it."
yeah,
But yes, it does that. She's always asking me. I guess I've become like accustomed to it. That I'm like, I know this is the movie, but
this is
yeah,
the movie, yeah,
she's always it really does work, and sometimes I'm not sure either. Like,
yeah,
was that I'm out here and I got trees surrounding me and woods, and I'm like, could be a coyote, could be just something going on in the movie. Either
yeah.
way, it's kind
Like,
of
either way,
creepy.
it's creepy, yeah,
But I love that because I do the sound is so important, and then that kind of the bass, the lower end stuff
yeah,
that kind of like physically affects you. I don't
yeah,
know how much you played with that, but I've heard of filmmakers like even going below what people can hear and
hmm,
mixing in some of that into the soundtrack because it will still physically affect you, which is
yeah.
super cool
On
too.
like a subconscious level for sure,
Yeah,
and so many of those low drones and booms do that,
yeah,
which you're only getting if you have a good subwoofer or you're in a theater
sure.
experience.
But it works in the theater. I mean, there's
Oh
been
yeah,
so many that I've seen in the theater, and yeah, from the first couple of minutes, you're like, I don't feel good about this.
mhm, yeah,
Why
yeah,
is this already making me feel bad? It's still sunny out. Everyone's still alive. Like,
yeah.
why do I feel this sense of dread? And
The
it's
sense of dread or a little bit of
it's sound.
nausea. Yeah,
Yeah, it's sound, and it's incredible what it can do. But that's really cool. So then, okay, so we're on last shift. You got a bunch of other stuff. You've worked on a bunch of other things coming up to Malum. This is just my focus for the episode. So I
yeah,
want to undersell what you did in between. It wasn't like you just sat down and waited 8 years and then
yeah,
decided to go
yeah.
do this again. But I guess this is one of the most unique situations I've seen where I don't know if I call it. A lot of people call it remake. Would you call it remake, reimagining? Like
We
what?
always use the word reimagining.
I think that's where I was going to. I don't see it as a straight remake. There's
No,
it's a different story.
yeah, it's different, and going into it, I was like, well, why do I want to make the same movie again?
This is going to be my question. Yeah, how
Yeah,
does that come up where the same director is like, "Hey, I've got bigger budget now, and like, do I want to revisit that same story?" It's a unique situation.
so it started. Two of my good friends had introduced me to Luc LeBeau, who was a producer on Malum, and I remember we were at a pumpkin patch around Halloween time, and I ended up taking a call with him while everyone else was pumpkin patching. Um, and he was like, I love Last Shift. And it's funny because Last Shift, when it came out, we didn't have a lot of luck with it originally, which
Mm,
sounds weird because it did. Magnolia released it. We always felt they could have done a wider release with it, like a bigger push on it. But after it came out, it didn't do any theatrical run, and we designed it for a theater experience. But it came out, they released it, and obviously Magnolia had the advertising power to a certain extent where they decided to put whatever it is they decided to put behind it. And then once it hit Netflix, it got a wider audience. But Last Shift was one of those movies that people could be like, oh, someone who was a fan of it could be like, oh, have you ever seen Last Shift? Kind of like when we were younger, you'd rent a movie and you could tell
yeah,
your friends, oh, you've never seen this movie. It's crazy.
right.
You got to watch it. It had, even still today, it has that kind of like, oh, if you've never seen Last Shift, check it out. So with Luke, he was like, listen, I think we could, they were marketing guys. He had done he was from the marketing at Orion Pictures, and him and Eric did marketing at Blumhouse together, and they were starting this company called Welcome Villain. And they're like, we have a plan on how we want to release these movies and put a good amount of the budget to marketing, and we want to do a theatrical with it. And he was like, I'm a big fan of Last Shift. Let's talk about doing something in that world.
Hmm.
And Scott, being smart and very crafty with a contract, he carved out all rights to remakes and sequels from Magnolia. So we retained all the rights to do any remakes and sequels that we wanted to, or reimaginings. Um, so we decided to not do a sequel, because we didn't want to. We didn't want to have to educate people in that sense of like, let's, if they haven't seen this movie, it had cult cachet, but it wasn't widely known.
Sure.
And that's how we kind of decided on, let's reimagine it and change the title and then go from there. And clever marketing could let people know, okay, well, if you've seen Last Shift, this is a reimagining, but if you haven't seen Last Shift, no big deal. This is Malum and it's something different.
Right.
And it was really hard at first because Scott and I were like, okay, it was interesting because I wanted Luke and the team at Welcome Villain to be kind of part of the journey the entire way, because also it was them who was saying, we really love this movie. So I wanted to be on the same page with like, okay, why did they really love Last Shift? Was it because of the effects? Was it because of the sound? Was it because of the lead character? I wanted to be on the same page when we were doing Malum. So like we did this vomit, like 4-page treatment of like, okay, the movie, we watched Last Shift, we read the original script, we kind of looked at like what we ended up leaving on the table, because that was a big part of it too. We had more money to play with. What did we have to leave on the table because we had such a small budget on Last Shift? What could we do? And to me, it was always about working with the flock, and they weren't called the flock in the original film. And there was also Hereditary had come out post Last Shift, and Hereditary was a very wide release and a very successful movie, and they used the same character that we used in Last Shift, which was this payment demon.
Yes.
And it had some other elements that had some of the same things that Last Shift did. So we're like, okay, well, we can't do that because Hereditary did it on a wider level.
I was gonna ask if that's why the name changed. Yeah, because that.
Yeah. So that was the big thing with the name change and the motivation change. But it also, I wanted to do something just completely original, like more Lovecraftian in terms of, I wanted to make up our own vernacular, things that were not in the zeitgeist, things that we could make our own, terminologies, deities, demonic beings that didn't exist in anything else. I didn't want to make a devil movie. So that was great that we could explore this kind of flock of the low god and what the low god was, and these other characters in the film and their belief system as a cult. So that was a huge part of it too. I've gone off on a tangent. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. So jump in.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think that's what interested me about Malum is, I guess, this is the internet for you, right? But it's not the way you guys marketed it. It's the internet's like, it's a remake, and this is, so I kind of went into it and I'm like, all right, remake, like I'm interested because it's the same, team behind it. This is, but it really is more reimagining, in that expansion into like the lore of the flock and the cult and the low, like that adds a lot. That adds levels that Last Shift just doesn't have. It's just a different, they're two very different movies, which I think people should understand is, they have similar themes. And the first, well, definitely not the beginning of Malum, but like the first act is, there's characters that come back and you see a lot of the stuff, but like it really does takes a turn, and it really goes somewhere that Last Shift didn't necessarily go all the way, probably budget and time and everything else. And I loved that part of it, that aspect, because it's not just, and I think that a lot of people, like, I wanted a remake, and like, this isn't it. And I think that turned some people away, but I think honestly, it grew a wider audience that enjoyed this bigger picture. Because I was telling my wife, this is like, as we're watching, I'm like, this is like Manson family plus Lovecraftian horror, like I thought of a movie like The Void, which is also kind of one
Yeah.
location, but mixed with the cult aspects, and it's a ghost story too, and it's hallucinations, or I was like, it's just a trippy kind of Lovecraftian type horror, which is really super. I mean, that's right up my alley. So I don't know if I'm one of the few, but like, not that I don't like Last Shift, but I actually liked Malum more. I don't know how it's hard probably for you to decide maybe, but
No,
I
I mean,
liked it more.
I want people to like it more. I mean, I think as a filmmaker, I progressed, so I feel like it's a more sophisticated movie.
Yeah.
I never get surprised if people say they feel Last Shift is scarier, because
I could see
it's
that.
more intimate,
Yep.
and Malum is a different ride, and that was
Yeah.
intentional. It's a different kind of horror, and by the third act, my intentions were not to scare, as more to be awe inspire in a way. And
Yeah.
the music, Samuel Lefen's score is so different from what Adam Barber did on Last Shift. Again, it's more of a synth wave, and there are times in that movie that we're looking for awe-inspiring type of music,
Yeah.
instead of like, oh, this music is creeping me out or freaking me out, which Last Shift does throughout
Right.
the whole movie. So I can always understand if someone's like, oh, I really like Melon, but I thought Last Shift was scary. I'm like, that's totally fair.
I think I'm probably in the, like, Last Shift is stuff, and obviously horror and like what scares you is super subjective. So
Super subjective. Yeah.
the isolationist type thing of like I hate being in a hotel room by myself,
Yeah.
on a work trip. I hate being home by myself. If my wife and the kids are gone and it's me alone at night, I hate that. So like that scares me more. Yeah, for sure. Like Last Shift scared me, but Malum had me like just engrossed in this, like the awe of it. Like
The
this
awe
is
and
just
the
real.
ride. And
It reminded me of a movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie Baskin,
yes.
with
Yeah.
some of what it's just that awe, and like, you're gonna take a trip straight into hell. We're not gonna hold back. Like this is it. You're gonna, shit's gonna hit the fan here. But it is like this weirdly inspiring, like everyone's clapping at the end. You're
Yeah.
kind of like, am I supposed to be cheering for these people? I don't know what to feel right now.
I don't know what
right?
to feel right now.
And even your main characters, there's this like kind of conflict with like, was her dad a bad dude, like, or was he, and everybody in the movie kind of has that conflict, like, am I rooting for this daughter of the murderer, or like, whose team am I on?
Whose team am I on? Yeah.
It was
Low
really
God,
cool.
Yeah.
It was really cool. And I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask too is maybe like between Last Shift, we're talking when you made that was 2013 into 14, and we're in 2022 for Malum. Just the depictions and the way that you deal with like police and the way the culture had shifted in that time. I mean, did that play in any of it too? Because I felt like the police almost felt a little bit dirtier in Malum in a way. And I don't know if that was intentional or just part of the story.
It was definitely a conversation, because early on it was like the whole approach to the whole zeitgeist of what police were in the nation had changed.
Vastly different.
And I'm like, we can't ignore that. But also, we're not here to make a political statement.
Right.
And interestingly enough, like Jessica Sula, she really didn't want to do that. She really didn't want to make like a political statement about the police or anything like that. And we had police working on both movies. Last Shift, we had going into Malum, I was very specific about some things. I was like, we need to shoot at an actual police station, because we did in Last Shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I need the local police to be involved heavily, because I just think it brought an air of realism to both movies. So we always had a supervisor on set, The officers in Malum were real officers. Not the like main leads, but all the supporting cast were like real officers in the movie, and they were training um, Jessica Sula and Juliana Harkavy in the original film. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We were going shooting with the police. They were showing them how they would interact with people. So that was all part of it. So the police were very involved with the making of Malum, and Jess's training, but we had to talk about what it meant. So yeah, I think definitely Malum has some of that zeitgeisty stuff in it, but it's all from the perspective of the lead character, because
Right.
if it didn't serve the lead character, then it didn't belong in the movie. So you had this great, like, she loves her father, right? She respects her father. She thought her father was he was this honored police officer who then did horrible things. So her choosing to go into the force, right? That's her point of view. I love police. I grew up with police. But yet then now she's coming in and she's being ostracized.
Right.
And what would evil people do to make her feel more ostracized? They would make her believe her father was a horrible person.
Right.
And that maybe her profession is a horrible profession. So it's all about, how do we tear down the lead's ego in a way? How do we make her feel small?
Yeah. No, I think you did it really, like, that's one of the things I was thinking about throughout, was kind of like, this is it was dealt with, like you said, not, there aren't like massive political, cultural, social statements. I mean, there's statements in here, but it's not in your
Sure.
face, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, it's not police are bad or police are great, and it stays that even line. But I did notice that there is definitely, I assumed you'd kind of taken a different sort of angle, but yeah, breaking it down through I thought that was a really interesting change, is like, this main character now has this tie to the father who was hero, but also murderer.
Yeah.
And then right there, you've already got this kind of duality of good or bad. Like, you're kind of leaving it up to audience to say, where do I stand, without having to make any sort of statements or anything, which I
Yeah.
thought was really, really smart.
Cool. Yeah.
That's cool. So I wanted to ask too, practical effects. Is everything looked practical? Is it all practical?
It was all practical.
I
I
thought
mean,
so.
we had we had like some tweaks. It's always good
Yeah.
to come in with tweaks, and you might need to clean stuff up and things like
Sure.
that. But yeah, I mean, we wanted a big practical effects budget, and the Russells came in and did a great job with that. And
Yeah, it was awesome.
we tried to bite off probably more than we could chew of having one after another. But I wanted that experience that people couldn't have in Last Shift, is like, have these
Right.
set pieces with these practical effects that build, towards the end of the movie, and people
Yeah.
feel satiated.
Right, because last shift, a lot of it's sort of like implied in a way. I assume,
Yeah.
just because you couldn't do everything with what you had, and yeah, the payoff is like, oh, we get to see all this stuff now,
Yeah.
and it's awesome. And it was very like, the low god, that reveal. I was kind of, what a creature that was. I don't know if that was you worked on that, or who, the art department, whoever worked on it. I was like, it was like Hellraiser Cenobite plus like Xenomorph plus like almost like Predator in a way. Very, like, it was like this just combination. I was like, yeah, that's just a
Well, I love Predator, as you can see behind
funky,
me.
yeah. Which just, I wasn't even thinking that till I saw that, and then in my head I was like, yeah, there's like a little bit of that in it too. Just a funky looking creature that was, with the pentagram head, was a great touch.
Well, and that was like I did a sketch of kind of a couple crude drawings of what I felt like it could look like, and then obviously what we described it as in the script.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew in the script that in the pentagram on the face was something that stood out in the first movie, and they used in a lot of marketing. I was like, well, how do we do that again but change it, or one up it? And
right.
That was in the design of this. Okay, well, it tears from the face, and then people will see that it's the inverted star, and some people may not even notice it, and it has this like face hugger
Yeah.
quality.
Yep.
And then the Russells were like, well, what if that's the thing that ends up on his face? It now becomes inverted on his face at the end when the last character shows up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a smart idea. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But and also my drawing of that character was very benign in a way, and that character is somewhat benign.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be. When you look at his face, he's not meant to be overtly like, oh, I'm mean or scary. I wanted him just to be this guy that shows up to do a job, right? Like,
Well, and yeah, and there's like there's a god-like quality where it's not devil. It's not necessarily straight devil demonic. There is sort of like that quality of, that could have been like some Egyptian god or something from 2,000 years ago that they drew. Like it has that sort of neutral look to it.
Yeah.
You're almost unsure of what to make of it.
Like,
You're like,
what's it gonna do?
What's he gonna do exactly?
And how is it interacting with humans? It's like we wanted to have that kind of feel that it was not. I'm here to eat the children. It's like it's above all that. It's above all those things. It's a cosmic entity.
Yeah. No, I definitely got it. It paid off. I definitely got that feeling because I really was that whole scene. You're kind of like the anticipation of like, what the hell is this thing gonna do? This just creature. It's monster. It's god. I mean, it's a god by that point. That they're worshiping. It's like, what is it gonna just like? It could destroy her. Is it gonna like take her in and make her part of the team? Like, what's going on here? Because it's not like instantly malevolent like in that way. It's very neutral, which is cool. Last question. I'll let you go, and I'm curious about this, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm always this movie right there's I don't know what's real and what's not, right? So in your eyes, I mean, does that actually happen? Is what happened actually happening, or is there something going on with her and being in that environment where her father was, and like, is a cult really taking over the town, or is she kind of? Because I went back and forth with it. I was like, I feel like this is happening, and this is maybe some future where, like, who knows? Like, United States is broken down, like we're not doing so hot, and this is what's going on in small town USA.
Yeah.
Or is she losing her mind here? I went back and forth, so I'm very curious. I mean, you don't have to commit one way or another.
I always commit with these questions because to me, I don't think like the filmmaker's response changes the audience's.
It doesn't.
Response.
No. You're still going to make your own opinion.
Yeah. You like intention. My intention was that it is real, and if you look at what happened to her father, he experienced something similar, right? Something similar happened to him. We just don't know what that is, and we never. But to us, what was always great about like her narrative is that she has a question. I want to know what happened to my father, and that's what she gets right at the end when she's kind of laughing. I think she realizes, she has her answer, and it's and now it's happened to her in this kind of faded way. And again, a lot of it is these things are kind of like The Shining in a way, right? I mean, these things are corporal to her, but not corporal to everyone. And yes, some of the flock is there in body, like those guys that drag her away at the end. They exist. I think that last motif of her, not to spoiler, right? That last motif of her sitting on the throne is real. I think that's something that's meant to be real.
Yeah.
And not just in her dying mind or something.
Okay, we're in the same boat then.
Yeah.
So it's a mix. It's a mix.
It's a mix.
Yeah. But what's happening is happening, but is it being exaggerated in her mind? Is she seeing things that aren't actually there, but others are? Yeah, like that is. I guess that's why I kept going back and forth, because at any given scene, you're like, Okay, yeah, this is happening. And then you're like, no, maybe not. Maybe she's losing her mind. Oh no, she's back. This might be real, which is
Yeah,
really cool. It's a cool trip. It's kind of that
something a lot of people
psychedelic horror.
don't notice, um, and if you go back and watch it, right? Okay, so she's running around at the end of the movie with a shotgun. Okay,
Hmm.
but where did she get the shotgun from? Who's
Okay,
the who's
I
the
had this
per?
question,
Yeah.
and it
So,
wasn't because she never stopped and grabbed her dad's shotgun, which was there. We know the dad's shotgun is there. Is that her dad's
well,
shotgun?
who showed her the shotgun?
The guy who might not be real, who I don't
R-
know if is real or not.
Right. He was right. He's dead. So the guy who revealed the guy who shows her the shotgun
Oh, right,
is
he's even
he's
dead. Right,
he's a dead man because
right,
when he reveals his head's blown off.
right.
So to me, the shotgun doesn't exist. The shotgun never existed. I mean, if you commit a murder with a weapon,
They don't
it's
just keep it. In
it's
the...
likely not to find its way like behind a cabinet at the police
Yeah,
station.
right.
So to me, the shotgun is just a device for her to take a journey. And then if you watch the very end of the movie, she has the shotgun and she shoots her mom. Now
Right.
that was a mindful. Her mom, if you look at the mom, she's shot with a single bullet wound, not a shotgun blast.
Okay.
And then when the shotgun falls to the ground at the end, there's a specific shot. She reaches for the shotgun, and when she pulls her hand in a frame, it's her pistol,
The pistol.
and
Yeah.
that's when she uses the pistol. So to me, it's the pistol she has in her hand through the whole end of the movie. It's not her father's shotgun. And some even I remember one of the producers was like, "Oh, that's a mess in the edit. Like that's wrong." I'm like, "No, I did that intentionally."
Mm.
And most people don't even catch it. Some people I don't even think even though it is a direct cut from the shotgun to the pistol, I don't think it doesn't register with a lot of people.
I caught that part. That
Yeah.
shotgun's gone. Now it's pistol. I did not catch the part with her mother, which makes more sense. Because I mean, she would just be cut in half if that was a shotgun.
Yeah, like
So,
from that close
that would have that would have hurt.
but
So wow.
and it just kind of adds to the trippiness, because I knew it
Right.
was like, and I was like, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I don't like people aren't gonna be like, wait a sec, like, well, that doesn't make any sense because again, so much of it is in her mind.
Right.
That it's there if people want to find those little kind of things along the
And
way.
then you start questioning yourself too, and you go, "Wait a second,
yeah.
am I losing my mind?"
Well,
She
yeah,
had-
because
she
it's
had a
confusing, right?
shotgun.
Yeah, it also becomes confusing for
Which
the audience
adds,
a bit.
Yeah, that adds to it too.
Disorients.
That's funny because there were several. I distinctly remember she showed up with a shotgun. I said, "Wait, where the hell did she?" That just kind of came out of nowhere. Where'd she get that? She never went back to
Yeah.
the room or whatever to grab that. It was it just kind of manifested. And I'm just thinking like, oh, maybe there was a scene and it got cut.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
we know it's there. So like we can extrapolate. Oh, she went back and got it, but no, it's not there. That's awesome. That's really cool. I love those little details. That's why I always tell people, don't watch a movie once. You got to watch it 2 or 3 times if you love it. Cause you're always, I've seen Jaws 150 times and every time I'm like, oh, that's cool. I never noticed that before.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh,
well,
man. I watched some movie the other day, and this story would be better if I remember what it was. But for the first, I literally, it was like a movie I'd watched so many times, and I was like, "Oh, Young Guns," not a horror film, not a horror film at all.
Sure.
But literally, I really love that movie growing up, and I've watched it so many times. I was watching it the other day, and again, Dermot Mulroney plays this character named Dirty Steve Stevenson. And he has this feud with Eve Chavez, what's the actor's name? La Bamba. I don't know. Lou Diamond Phillips, right?
Yes.
And they have this feud through the whole movie.
Yep.
And at the end of the film, Dermot Mulroney's character gets shot down like a dog, right? And he doesn't get a horse. And it finally dawned on me because he was just yelling about Lou Diamond Phillips. He's like, that motherfucker, he went off to fuck his horse. And it literally, the first time I caught it, because it's not, they didn't really, it was just in the melee, is that he helps Lou Diamond Phillips' character get on the horse and whaps it to run. He knew he was going to die. And it was the first time it registered to me that, like, oh, this is an intentional character act and arc for this character. And it pays off in that moment. And I was like, how did I miss that all these years? But it's funny. You watch a movie so many times and you're always picking stuff up.
I know. I end up, I watch the movies again, usually before I'll interview somebody, right? And then after I interview people, I have to go back and watch again because of the conversation. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I missed so much just watching this by myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a ton of fun. I had the, you guys did a great job with Terror Vision on the 4K and the Blu-ray release of it.
Yeah, they did a good job with that.
That's what I've got behind me here. I have the 4K release. Gorgeous. Lots of cool special features. You had an introduction on there, which is sweet. There's commentary. So yeah, it's a nice release if you guys want to check it out. That's how I watch it. Is it streaming anywhere right now if people don't have the physical?
It's on it's on Stars.
Okay.
It's on Stars, but it's also, iTunes and Amazon.
Yeah, you could buy it. Rent a copy.
Yeah.
Sure.
But Stars has like a window with it.
Gotcha. But yeah, the physical copy was super cool. The artwork, everything they did on that.
Yeah, they did a great job with it. And the transfer was really nice. The 4K transfer.
It was really nice. Yeah, it looked great. So
sometimes those 4K transfers are tough. It's sometimes you get a
hit
movie.
Or miss.
Yeah, you can be hit or miss. You're like, I kind of like the Blu-ray better.
Yep, definitely hit or miss. But no, this was solid. I mean, even if you got just the standard Blu-ray release of it, it'd be solid. It looked great. But the 4K was really cool. It sounded awesome too. Still great sound effects and mixing. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. So I would recommend that.
Thank you.
If anybody wants to watch it, that was a pretty sweet way to do it. That's the way I'd want to watch it. So
yeah,
I recommend that. Terrorvision.com has it. You can rent it. And then, I guess what's next for you? Anything coming up? Anything you want to plug?
We're writing some horror stuff. We may do, and we're still pushing Malum. We may do some conventions this fall with Malum.
Nice.
But Natalie and I are writing our next horror feature, so it's what we're focusing on.
Awesome. I can't wait for it. So far, it's been a good run so far. So I've got
good run so far. Yeah,
I'll be there for it. You tell me when. I'll be there for it. But
that's what we need.
Yeah, and if you have any conventions and you're ever out this way again, definitely let me know. We can spread the word and
all right, good.
Tell people where you're at. But this was awesome. So thank you for doing this. I just learned so much. This is honestly why I do this. I think I do this podcast selfishly for myself, to be able to talk to people and learn more and
get all the tidbits,
get all the little details that because I am that person. When I finish a movie, I go on IMDb and I go right down to trivia and I'm like, what did I miss? What do I know right? about this? So this is my advanced trivia behind the scenes for movies that I love. So this was awesome. I appreciate you taking the time.
No, I love talking about it too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. So yeah, go check out Malum. You can rent it. It's on Stars. You can get that Blu-ray 4K physical copy, which I know most of my listeners are gonna skew that way anyway, because I'm that guy. If you're watching, you can see it all behind me. So yeah, go support it. It's a great heart. And if you've seen Last Shift, go in with a fresh, kind of open mind, because it's a different film. It's not remake. It's reimagining. It's a different story. That would be my advice for anybody who's seen Last Shift.
I do tell people. I mean, it's funny when the movie came out. So many of the mainstream reviews were like, "Wow, I rewatched Last Shift, and then I watched Malum, and I was like, man, I wish you didn't do it that way." But I guess that's the knee-jerk instinct to be like, let me rewatch Last Shift and then go see Malum, because I feel like it's better just to watch it with fresh eyes. And then go watch Last Shift. If I ever did a double feature, I'd do it the other way around. Malum first and then Last Shift. Yeah,
I do. I think that works better, to be honest. And yeah, you get it's a different experience. It's really scary and super horror versus the cosmic kind of horror, the cult horror, that which I'm a huge fan of. So that's why Malum appealed to me so much. But yeah, I mean, they're both great, but definitely don't feel like you have to sit down and watch
No.
Last Shift and then,
No.
20 minutes later pop in Malum and go, like, I think you're right. Like, going in just kind of maybe with it in the back of your head if you've ever seen it, but
Sure.
you really don't even need to have seen
No.
Last Shift to
For
enjoy
a new
Malum. It
audience,
stands
yeah.
on its own, which is really cool. It's a super unique thing you got to do. So I mean, it's really cool to talk about.
It was very unique to do for myself as well. It was a totally different kind of experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you
Very
haven't
cool.
seen Malum yet, go watch it.
Definitely go watch it. Go support the horror films. There's so many great movies coming out these days, and a lot of them they're on the lower budget side. They're independent films. They're doing their thing. They're killing it out there. So I'm always down to support.
Long Legs and Cuckoo are the ones that I'm really like.
Oh, okay, so we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
Long Legs looks like it is right up my alley,
Yeah.
and Cuckoo looks like it could be a sweet double feature a couple of weeks later.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you. Those are my most anticipated for the summer, to be
And
honest.
both neon releases.
Yeah.
So they're definitely hitting something that I like there.
Yeah, they are, for sure. Well, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
I'll put all the links in the video if you guys want to check out Malum, if you want to buy the 4K, the Blu-ray, whatever. I'll link it all. Go support them. TerrorVision are great guys. I've worked with them. I wrote an essay for one of their releases. Solid company. So check them out, support them, and I'll put your links as well. People can follow you and stay up to date with what's going on.
Awesome, man. Thanks a lot.
Hey there, movie buff. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of House of 1,000 Movies. I hope you had as much fun listening as I did discussing some of my favorite films. Don't forget, if you're into video podcasts, you can head over to the YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button. If you're already on YouTube, it's right there, so why not hit it? And for our audio listeners, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. If you've been enjoying the show, why not show me some love by leaving a 5-star review? It really helps me out, and it lets me know that I'm hitting the mark. And hey, before you go, a quick shout out to our sponsors. By supporting them, you're not just supporting the show, but also the content you love. Thanks again for joining me in the House of 1,000 Movies. Until next time, keep watching, keep listening, and keep watching great movies. Take care, everyone.